Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. We'll be doing a review of the newest episodic DLC for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the Fate of Atlantis. And wow, that was something. I mean, overall, it is a pretty massive mixed bag for me. It really just continues the mediocrity of Assassin's Creed Odyssey as a whole. In like almost every aspect, mission-wise, narratively, voice acting, gameplay, I mean everything. This will be a non-spoiler review for the most part. I mean, I won't go into detail on anything spoiler related. I'll probably save that for a future video I plan on doing. This will just be a quick wrap-up of my opinions on the entire DLC. So let's go episode by episode. Let's start off with the beginning. Actually, now I think about it, we should start off with the Heir of Memories, actually. This was a free DLC. This was part of the Lost Tales of Greece. The Heir of Memories here was a prologue to the Fate of Atlantis, and gameplay-wise, it was pretty mundane. I mean, most of the gameplay pretty much just consisted of you finding Aletheia at caves, and then once you do that, you play as Layla, and then you search for symbols. Like, it's pretty mundane. You spend a lot of the time underground. It's not really fun gameplay-wise. But I do think narratively, it was actually a pretty good setup. I thought it added a lot of mystery and intrigue that the series had been missing ever since the Desmond saga. I think they set up some pretty cool stuff. I think the setup here actually made me excited for what they were going to do with the rest of the Fate of Atlantis narratively. And obviously I was let down, but we'll talk about that later. But outside of that, I mean, the Deimos thing at the very end is really dumb. But overall, I did like the Heir of Memories, and I was excited to see what would come afterwards, which was Episode 1, Fields of Elysium, and I hated this episode. I really did. I mean, outside of something like The Last Maharaja, this was probably my least favorite product Assassin's Creed had ever released. I mean, really, it was so boring. It's so boring, it's so big. This open world here, I mean, I was going for 100% completion, so I did try to do everything within the game, and there's just so much here and so much tedious stuff here. And thankfully they fix it for later episodes. This is the only episode where I really got annoyed at trying to complete all the locations, but it was still a pain. Mission structure wise, this episode is appalling, with most of the missions just requiring you to do basic open world completion stuff. There's only one side quest in this entire episode, and it consisted of liberating 8 soldiers from each region, which was annoying in itself as well. Elysium looks fine. I mean, there's some weird textures here and there, which is kind of the same opinion I have of some of these later locations, but the biggest problem I had with Elysium was its level design. I mean, the fact that the elevation radically changed, like, with every single location you would go to is just such a pain, because you would either have to climb a mountain to get to whatever location you wanted to go to, or you would have to find this teleporter, which the teleporters were really annoying as well, because the teleporters were only in one specific location, obviously. So if the teleporter is like on the other side of the mountain, you would still have to go around the entire mountain to get to the teleporter. So most of the time it was just quicker to climb anyway. The Keeper's Insights in this game were just modified versions of skills from the original game, and most of them sucked. I never used really any of them. There was one that I kind of kept around for a little while until I realized it just wasn't that good. Because the thing that sucks is that if you use the modified version of that skill, you can't also use the original version. So because of that, it was just kind of pointless. From a narrative perspective, this episode was a complete mess. The entire narrative focused on this, like, civil war between the gods that you just didn't care about. None of these gods were particularly interesting characters, and I didn't care about anything that was going on. And the dumbest thing about everything here is that it's all a simulation. Like, canonically, they explain that, oh, these worlds that you're going to, they're simulations. Yet, like, everything Cassandra does within these worlds, she reacts as if it's a real thing that's happening. Like, it's really dumb, because, like, she's blatantly told these are simulations. Like, why are you so worried about things that are going on here? I mean, it's really terrible writing, and this goes through the entire DLC as well. And it gets even dumber in the final episode. But overall, I mean, this episode just sucked. I mean, the modern day in here sucked. Open world was a pain to navigate. There's so many pointless locations. I mean, really, it's just, there was nothing good about this episode. I hated it in almost every aspect. But then we move on to episode 2, The Torment of Hades, which I thought was a massive improvement. especially from a gameplay and a mission structure standpoint. The narrative itself is still pretty bad. I mean, I did find it tighter than the first episode, so at least there's that, but overall, not great. The open world itself was much better designed in my opinion, while it was less aesthetically pleasing and more depressing looking. I do feel like it was designed better, where there were less points where I was really annoyed at trying to navigate where I was supposed to be going. Even though there were more underground locations, which aren't my favorite either. Now for the missions themselves, they were an improvement over the last DLC, but they still weren't great. I mean, a lot of them comprised of you just killing random soldiers. That would allow you to get an armor, that would allow you to enter a thing, to kill other people, blah, blah, blah. It was mostly filler, but I did enjoy playing it more so than episode 1. I actually like the side quests in this DLC, as most of them had a connection to the main story of the game, where certain characters that died in the original game showed up here, and I thought that was actually pretty interesting. Even though, again, the writing is pretty poor. The Fallen system, which was pretty much just a modified version of the Mercenary system, but it was required for you to do as you need to get the Armor of the Fallen to continue on with the game. And the Guardian boss battles that were here, they were pretty much filler as well. I mean, there's massive damage sponges. But then again, that's Odyssey for you. The modern day was ridiculous in this episode. I mean, it's ridiculous throughout this entire DLC. But there's one moment in this DLC that I literally laughed out loud when it happened because it's so ridiculous. And it really just solidifies how poorly written Odyssey's modern day is. But overall, I did enjoy episode 2 more than episode 1. And spoiler alert, I liked it more than episode 3. So overall, episode 2 is probably my favorite episode of the bunch. But now for the final episode, episode 3, the Judgement of Atlantis, which was, for the most part, more of the same. I kind of think it took some of the good things from episode 2, while taking a lot of the bad things from episode 1. I mean, where should I start? Main mission wise, it was actually pretty short, and it surprised me at how short it was actually. It's really strange. It really felt rushed to me in terms of the narrative itself. Side quest wise, there were only a few. It wasn't as many as episode 2, but there were a few. It was fine. Level design wise, this is kind of what I was mentioning earlier, where I feel like level design wise, it took all the bad from episode 1. I think it was more aesthetically pleasing. The level design is very similar, where there's a lot of buildings and elevated platforms and roads and stuff that you have to go through. There's a lot of water, which is really annoying. I mean, again, I like the overall design of it, but the problem is when you're actually playing within it, it's not fun. Now for the narrative. What a mess. Again, as I mentioned, the main quests were pretty short, so that felt a bit rushed. But then we get to the ending, which is abysmal. Like, it's really some of the worst writing I've seen in anything ever. It's so bad, especially because like the ending of the actual DLC, like the actual Atlantis part of the DLC, makes it seem like, oh, this is so important. This is something that's going to change everything. But again, it's a simulation. Like, it doesn't matter. None of this matters. What are we doing? And they even mention right afterwards that none of this happened. It's like, what are we doing? But then we get the modern day, which is even dumber. It's so dumb. It's like, what are we doing with this? We have Layla, who is quite possibly the worst written character in the history of gaming. Like, it's really bad. And there's so many dumb things that happen in this ending. And like, the entire DLC leads to nothing. Like, nothing happens. Nothing of consequence happens throughout this entire DLC. Nothing happens with Alethea. Nothing happens with Layla. Nothing happens of consequence within these simulations. Nothing really happens with Cassandra. Nothing happens. This DLC is so pointless from a narrative perspective. So there we go. Those are my thoughts on Fate of Atlantis. And what a shit show that was. I mean, that was pretty bad. I mean, okay, was it better than Legacy of the First Blade? Probably. I think it probably was. I mean, I think at least it tries at certain things more than Legacy of First Blade. Legacy of First Blade's on a much smaller scale. They're both very poorly written and have really terrible mission design. But I mean, I feel like overall, I came out of Fate of Atlantis with more positives to say about it than I did with Legacy of the First Blade. But overall, in the grand scheme of DLCs, it's not great. I mean, it's pretty bad. I mean, I will be doing a video in the future where I rank all of the Assassin's Creed DLCs. That was a video that I plan on doing for a while. I'll probably do it eventually. But Fate of Atlantis is not going to be ranked super high. I mean, if I were to give scores for these DLCs, I mean, I would give episode 1 probably like a 4 out of 10. Episode 2 probably like a 7 out of 10. Episode 3, I don't know, 6, 5, somewhere around there. Who cares? It's not good. I mean, if you like Odyssey, you might like this. But as someone who didn't like Odyssey, I didn't like this. I think this just truly shows where Assassin's Creed is heading in terms of narrative, and the fact that it's terrible. So yeah, that's the video. That's my review of Fate of Atlantis. Thank you for watching.